And thank you all for coming and joining us on a Saturday.
Welcome, everyone. It's beautiful to be in community with all of you. I know that for a lot of us, it's been a very heavy week and very dark. And we are, I can speak for myself, really thinking about what is to come tomorrow, next month, and for the next 4 years. So I really just appreciate you for just showing up. And something that's like a healing balm for me is being in community with others, despite all of our differences, but like other people that just want to love on each other and just be good humans. So I just really appreciate that. And before we start our conversation, we have some questions, but we're very mindful of what's going on and what we're coming in. We're coming in here with different experiences for what's going on in our climate here in America, our personal lives, and our homes. So, I want to be sensitive to that, and I just kind of want to talk. So we have questions, but we're going to have a conversation. But first, what I would love for us to do is, if you don't mind and you feel comfortable, to just breathe. However, I just feel like just if you can close your eyes so you're not distracted, just take a moment and just sit with yourself and your feelings right now. And just take a deep inhale in and exhale out. And if you can just take a few more breaths within your own pace. We'll center ourselves back in this space. Thank you, and we'll get started. So a wellness check. I even do this at work, Sharon. Like before we jump into business, I just want to ground us so that, because we are navigating life in so many different ways. So I just want to check in. So at this moment right now, Sharon, how are you?
So I'm really grateful for the question. Thank you, because I think often as somebody who gets invited to talk a lot in public and present my views and my work, it can feel like a really intellectual exercise and it only happens in my head. But actually, there's a lot of an emotional work that goes into the things I do, the things I write. And always showing up is a very physical experience as well. While I was doing the breathing exercise, I was just like feeling, oh yeah, I'm here, I'm in Boston, I'm sitting next to Nakia, and I'm feeling surprisingly good. I don't know where that feeling comes from because I was feeling very different on Wednesday, but I feel like there's a lot of, I'm accessing a lot of thoughts that are written online about possible ways forward that make me feel somehow optimistic is not quite the right word. I don't think it's all going to magically be better, but I just feel like there are options to be able to act that I didn't see before on Wednesday. How are you?
Right now, I can honestly say that I'm well, but when I woke up maybe at 3 a.m. on Wednesday, I was like exhausted and I felt like I had nothing left to give. And I sat in those real emotions for like probably up until I walked through the door. Like I have nothing left to give. Because just for me as a Black woman, also a graduate of Howard University, um, that was a reminder the last, 102 days or however many days that VP Harris was running to be the first woman president. Just a lot of the visceral negativity and like critique and attacks and dissection that she experienced, that was really triggering for me, because that was like part of my experience, because my experience as a Black woman is not full of trauma. It's full of joy. It's full of victory. It's full of love. But there are parts of my life experience, I can say, as an American in this country, that it's extremely difficult. And I feel like a lot of, when we think of sexism and racism and all of the isms, some people, it's not like front of mind, it's intentional, but I think like embedded on like what person deserves to be, listened to, treated with respect, protected. That is a learned behavior in society. Like when it comes to Black people, Black women, like we are not considered. And sometimes you need to be, I feel like some people need to be reminded, like, no, we need to be treated with respect and kindness. And, when we work hard, we should be able to benefit as anyone else because of our efforts. So that was like my experience as a Black woman was on display for the entire world to see, and to see both sides, regardless of, there were a lot of parts of, and I'm taking this another because I'm processing, I'm going to be transparent and real. Of course, there was a part of, whatever leaders, regardless. I was not rooting for VP Harris based off of the fact that she was a Black woman who actually, graduated from my university, but because she was qualified. And not everything, I'm not looking for perfection or savior in any way, but like in regards of our democracy, like democracy is a real thing. Our votes matter. We really saw that. And we had a responsibility. And I'm not voting shaming anyone, but as a country, we missed the mark. And it's just sad. It is just really sad. So like right now, I can say that I'm well, but I'm still processing, because who I am, I have to brace myself for people who really believe that someone who looks like me, like my people, do not deserve a right to be educated, a right to, be in leadership. And they'll be nasty and hateful. And it's that negative behavior from this individual who, is going to be the president, the leader of our country, like that behavior provides it just gives people permission to harm individuals. And that's why it's just, and it's beyond 4 years, it's institutionally. So that is where I am right now. And I just honestly am like, I just have to show up as myself, and just really, I have some reflection prompts at the end, just to really, there just been things that have been coming front of mind for me. And one of them is like, what can I control in my orbit? We can't all save the world, but we can change ourselves. We have power, we have control over ourselves. And we saw, we had power in numbers. Like, thank you for those people that were actually supporting, campaigning, and that's fighting against a genocide and speaking up. And like, we love each other, and we are agreeing to disagree, and it's uncomfortable and it feels weird, but we're having really difficult conversations. And I just think about, individuals from marginalized communities who are really scared right now. And I just hope, and I know that this is streaming live into the people in this room as well, that I just hope that we all know that we have power in a collectiveness. There is power in love. And just to be gentle with ourselves and be gentle with each other. And, yes, a majority of people, unfortunately, I don't know if they realize it, but they, voted in support of a figure that is a representation of white supremacy and hate. And those who did not, like whatever side of the fence, like we just have to stand on the side of truly love. And I think that love, read books, support, and invest in communities that will be really, really struggling, because it's the right thing to do to help uplift those who are potentially maybe harmed and have been. And it's going to, that's all I have to say for now. But those are my thoughts. I have to kind of like lay that on the floor. And with that exhaustion, I am like, I'm going to get up. I'm going to continue to be great. I'm gonna be the greatest Black self that I can be, and speak life into people and spread love and be proud of who I am. And that's what I have control over. How I'm showing up in the world, how I'm treating others. And it's, I am not a perfect woman, but I just really strive to, when people experience me, that they feel empowered, that they feel motivated, and that they feel seen and heard, because it's our responsibility, despite who is in the White House. Nakia's gonna be Nakia. I'm gonna still show up as myself.
Yeah, yeah. I really, really hear that. One of the sentences that you just said was that the country missed the mark. And I had to think about that because I'm not sure if you're aware, but in Germany, on the same day that we found out the election results, the government collapsed. There was an internal dispute, which has been going on actually for a long time. The coalition government was always having struggles. But on Wednesday evening, the finance minister was sacked. And that means that the planned elections that were going to happen in September of next year are suddenly on our doorstep, which means we also face the situation where the country has the responsibility now to think very carefully about what the future of Germany should look like in terms of who the elected leaders are going to be. And the things that have been taking place in the United States have an effect, right, on people's perception of, who the winners could look like, for example. So I'm very aware of that when you say the country missed the mark here, that I'm thinking, it's possible that we're marching into a situation in Germany where the country will miss the mark there also. And I'm really, it saddens me greatly that in the country that I was born and raised in, which is Britain, and a country that is now my chosen home, which is Germany, and I suppose in this temporary home that I am in the United States, that in all three contexts, this rhetoric, this anti-migrant rhetoric seems to work so well. And I don't get it, right? I'm so puzzled by why people are taken by this argument that it's the guy who's just arriving, who's just struggling, like we all are, to make a better life for themselves. That guy is the threat, but not the people who are not paying their taxes and exploiting the workers. And I'm thinking about that a lot in the months going forward. What could be done? What can be done now in the United States in this context, and what can be done in my context where we still have a little bit of time. I'm not optimistic that we'll completely change the face of the political context there, but there's still a little bit of time to influence what might happen.
I think there is definitely power in our dollars. So investing in, institutions and organizations and individuals who are on the right side of history, and that's here to preserve spaces for like this, like where we can talk about this topic, and that there's art that's activated throughout the space. I think like just being very aware of like where we are, yes, who we're voting for is really important. And it's beyond like, voting for a president, but it's our mayor, our city councilors, school committee, like, just taking up space in those institutions is really important. I think our dollar, where we spend our time, what we spend our time talking about, like, are we spewing, verbiage about hate, or are we talking about love and how we're going to make our communities a better place, which I feel like you said, and when you mentioned that earlier, like what goes, like other countries look at America and, whatever's America's like the lead-in, the place of the land and opportunity. That's why people want to come here. So like, if America's raggedy, then people just gonna be like, we just gonna be raggedy. Like, we're just not going to care about people and just...
It's also the inspiration, it's inspiring, in inverted quotes, that somebody... I wanted to get through this event without speaking out his name. Never mind. Somebody like the person who won the election could win, right?
Yeah.
And the people that he surrounds himself with. It's inspiring, actually, for right-wing extremists around the world. And I think they look to what's happened and look to the strategies that were used and think, okay, we can do the same. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So... but I think there is also, I think one of the things that they managed to do is this kind of networking across borders. And it strikes me that people who want to provide a resistance to those movements will also need to network across borders, which is another reason why I'm really glad that this was possible today, because I hadn't heard of your work before. You and I were put together for this panel, and I think I would really like to talk a lot about the work that you do on the ground. Like, you do a lot of grassroots work, working with individuals and young people and communities, and bringing people into conversation with each other. And one of the most powerful methods of doing that is through writing, encouraging people to write. And I wondered if you could talk a bit about why you choose, writing, creative writing, literature as this method to bring people together.
I believe that writing is a tool for healing and resistance. And I am a self-publisher, so I publish all of my books. And I learned how to publish a book from an organization, 826 Boston, which is a nonprofit youth writing and tutoring center in Roxbury. And they publish a host of beautiful publications of young writers in Boston. So when we talk about our dollars and investing in organizations, 826 Boston would be an amazing organization. Also Boston Art Review, which I have the privilege of being on the board of, who just highlights and celebrates and tells the stories of artists in our city. Those are two organizations that I hold dear. But I learned everything I learned from working in the arts nonprofit sector about publishing books. And I publish books because, like, I'm a journalist as well. And I wanted to work in New York City at a sleek, I want to work at Vibe magazine or Essence magazine.
Yes.
And, you know, as a writer, your goal is to be published. I have been published in very notable publications, but I'm like, I want a book deal. And I just never really put my all into like shopping my manuscript around, which you actually have really encouraged me. I'm just like, 2025 is the year that I'm going, because I've been working on a book about my experience as a Black woman in the workplace since the recession. So I'm like maybe 130 pages in. So like hearing about your work, I'm like, I can do this. You just
can
need
do it.
to
Yeah.
just do it.
Keep going, keep going. Yeah.
But the reason why I publish books myself, because I don't want to wait on a big publishing company to do the work for me. I'm like, I'm going to do it myself. And I'm not publishing work that is all Nakia. I believe in preserving the voices of Black women and girls. So I publish anthologies. And I have a call for writers. This is my second anthology, my third book, How We Take Up Space, and the theme is spatial justice. So there's like stories and poems and short essays on spatial justice written by women and girls of color in Boston. Like, how do they navigate Boston's public parks and spaces? How do they take up space in society? So that's why I really have been interested in, when I was an undergraduate student at Howard, I was so obsessed with the Moreland Spingard Library, and I would like hang in the stacks. So I just loved being there, just because it was just, they had like manuscripts from Toni Morrison.
Yeah.
So I really love archiving, and books is a way for me to archive other Black women and girls' stories. So that's why I write and publish books.
That's brilliant. And I see a link immediately with the title, How We Take Up Space, to the title. This is my first novel. In the US edition, it's called Ada's Room. And that was also an idea that followed me while I was writing the book, because this is a book that actually has a timeline that spans 500 centuries. And one of the thoughts I had was how amazing it is that I've been given the opportunity to write a novel, and I'm going to take up space, right? So that's, that follows me a lot. And I really like the idea of being a self-starter and saying, I'm going to publish, I'm not going to wait for somebody to publish me. And I'm also going to bring other people along. I'm going to also use the access that I have and the energies I have to encourage and assist other people to write too. And that's similar. I had a similar experience. My very first book I wrote, it was published in 2012. And the publishing house wasn't actually a literary publisher, so it was almost self-publishing. It was a left-wing publishing collective, and they usually publish things, treaties on capitalism or arguments against climate change, this kind of thing. That was actually their field. But they said to me they wanted to do the work of anti-racism. And they were like, yeah, Sharon, if you write something, we will publish it. We will support what you do. So I wrote my first novella and published it there. And then my idea was similar to the idea that you had, that I thought I would really like for other people, specifically Black people living in Germany who traditionally don't really have access to publishing, for them also to have the opportunity to publish their work. So I started a series, a book series of different forms of literature, so also an anthology, a poetry collection, a short story collection. The series is called Witnessed, and it's written in English, because at the time I felt like, even though I speak fluent German, it was not a language I felt confident in to say I can judge, whether the work is ready, I can't proofread anything or something like that. So I decided to do this in English, and then I think the book series has 7 books at the moment. And yeah, it was only when my work was translated into German, though, that there was some kind of reception within Germany. And it took a little while again after that before I actually got the book contract with the German publishers. I wrote this book in German, actually, and then it was translated into English. So I needed the support, I would say, of people who recognized that I was doing that work. I was approached by a journalist, a literary critic, who was on the board, no, on the jury of a literary competition, which is named for an author called Ingeborg Bachmann. And I was asked if I would like to take part in this competition. And it was only because of that that I'm sitting here today, I would say. And that it needs people to think a little bit outside of the box and make these interventions and give people opportunities for change to happen.
Like fellowships,
yeah,
residencies.
Yeah.
Like my first book that I published, well, I published 2 books. It was my first anthology and my first book of poetry, Water Carrier. And I mean, because this costs money. So, and also, which is why, like, just thinking about like who is a part of your local government and the federal government, I was able to produce books. And whenever I produce books, I choose to work with Black and women of color. Like I said, there's power in your dollar, so I'm investing in paying the writers for open mics, paying the editors, the designers, all of the things. But I was at Artist in Residence for the Mayor's Office of Arts and Culture, and I received a grant, and I was able to. I was working full time. That was crazy, but I was working full time and doing a full time residency.
Yeah.
And leading I launched my own girls of color writers and publishing program. It was for about 6 weeks and published an intergenerational anthology. But I was able to do that because the city we live in a city that supports the arts and invests in the arts, where their residencies and fellowships are really important because they give artists funds to be able to create, just use time like you're doing to create, like we have the privilege of doing. So that's really important.
Yeah.
And the reason why voting really matters.
Yes.
You want to make sure that you're voting for leaders that support the arts.
Absolutely. I think this would be a good time. Where's Hannah? I'd like to show a short trailer, because on that note, I had the support of a cultural, I don't know, they organize a festival every year in West Germany, and it's called the Ruhrfestspiele. And they were the ones who approached me and said, do you have an idea that you would like to, that we can support you with our platform? And from that came the literature festival that I curated. So we can show the trailer and then talk a bit about that. Shall we take a step to one side? Yeah.
So you guys can see.
Was ist schwarze deutsche Literatur für euch? Ganz simpel.
Aber hallo.
Es gibt überhaupt gar keinen Raum für uns und für unsere Erfahrungen in der deutschen Sprache.
Eigentlich findet ja alles in diesem harten, kalten, weißen Raum statt. Ich möchte über Frauen lesen, die Männerkleidung tragen, über Männer, die Frauenkleidung tragen. Ich möchte von schwarzen Menschen lesen.
Ich gehe die Straße entlang. Ich höre sie schon rufen. Hey, was machst du denn hier? Was hast du hier zu suchen? Du bist am falschen Ort, Mann. Und die Zeiten sind hart. Geh dahin, wo du herkommst, Mann. Geh woanders an den Start. Und ich bin fremd im eigenen Land und ich wette, diese Jungs werden es niemals checken. Selbst wenn wir eine schwarze Bundeskanzlerin hier hätten.
So what I can tell you about the festival is, I told you about this short story competition that I was invited to participate in. And I only ended up in that short story competition because somebody approached me. And it was my impression that the person who approached me was very much like many people who work in the literature industry in Germany, didn't know that many Black people, didn't know people who write. Even if you know Black people, you're not sure that they can write, not sure that they produce literature or prose. And I thought, it would be really good if I can somehow create a space where Black people who are writing creatively but haven't got access to agents, haven't got access to publishing houses, are in contact with people who are really looking, because it was Black Lives Matter 2020 summer, everybody was like suddenly, oh no, we're not racist, we're going to prove it, right? And so there were people who were looking for Black writers. So one of the ideas with this literature festival, Resonanzen, which is the German word for resonance, was to try and get people in the room together. And in this informal atmosphere where we're anyway talking about literature, that those connections can happen. The other thing that I did was I kind of modeled the festival on this competition that I'd taken part in that there is a jury of 4 people who are literature critics or authors, translators, who have an expertise for literature, but they're all Black. So they also have an expertise for Afro-diasporic literatures. They were all sent short stories to read. These short stories were written by 6 authors who I knew personally. I knew that they were writing, or I knew that they were somehow encouraged. I knew one person was, for example, doing writing workshops and was encouraging other young people to write, hello, welcome. And I spoke to each of them individually and I said, what do you think? Would you like to take part in this event? And they were all like, oh my goodness, but it needs this kind of encouragement, right? This first planting the idea. So they each wrote a short story. And then I sent these short stories to the jury. Nobody knew the names. They didn't know who was in the jury, didn't know who had written the stories. And then there was a 3-day event. The first one took place in 2022. And the stories are read out loud for the first time in public by the authors, and then the jury has a half-an-hour discussion on them. And the beautiful thing is that these stories are discussed, I want to say, with a kind of 360-degree perspective. So what can happen in Germany and in the current literature world is when an author writes a book. So there were a couple of authors who published novels before me, in the years before me. Their books are kind of read very narrowly, very like a sociological study. Right. Like, is this an autobiography? Is this what you experienced, And at the festival, it was possible for the stories to breathe, I want to say, that they were compared to other stories, they were compared to other texts or even oral history, storytelling that had happened before. And it was a beautiful atmosphere. And I was able to, I was lucky enough to be given the opportunity to do it again. So 2024, it happened again, this time for 4 days. And we framed it with also academics, so the people from the United States and from the UK who research Black German literature. Like Black German literature is has more attention outside of Germany than it does within Germany. And they came and gave discussions, or they had panel discussions about it. And it was an extremely powerful and empowering experience.
Are you hosting anything in 2025?
Very good question.
So I'm trying to go to Germany.
Yeah, it's a lot of work. So the thing that I find, you talked about your exhaustion, right? Like you feel like you have nothing more to give. And this is something that I think is so symptomatic of Black women, that they do so much community work, apart from the care work in their families, apart from looking after themselves and trying to, the hustle is real kind of thing. And so I just felt like, how can I keep up the responsibility for this community of writers while at the same time doing my own creative writing. It's really difficult to do both, right? When I'm doing Resonanzen, I feel like I can't do really anything else. And I am also a mother. And so it's a question I have. I'd love to do it. I love the festival. And it comes with a big sacrifice. So that's the balancing act. How do you manage that?
Yeah, that's how I feel when I produce anthologies. Like, I do it as service to give Black girls and women voice and space to just express themselves the way we speak in whatever language that is, because Black people are not a monolith. Like, I mean, to be sitting here with a Black German author, like, writing created this opportunity for me that I'm really grateful for, like, creating this where we come from, we're Black women, and we just come from two different worlds, but we're still Black. So shout out to us.
Yes.
So whenever I create anthologies, although it is a joy to uplift other voices, it does take time away from my work. And then the question that we usually hate is like, what are you working on next?
Yeah.
Nothing. I'm working on sleep and resting and just being my best self. So I, like, as of now, unless God is literally like, you need to produce another anthology, I'm going to focus on finishing the book that I've been working on for the past over 10 or so years now. And I'm going to write more poetry and go to open mics and be inspired and just travel. I love and live life, like living, whether that is traveling, falling in love, whatever it is, like that inspires my writing. So right now I'm just in a period of like, I am living, which is going to inspire my work because I write nonfiction. I really tried to write fiction, but it's tough.
Why?
You just have to use a different part of your brain and be imaginative in a way.
But you have to be imaginative with nonfiction too.
You know, I don't really.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm like constantly just telling the truth in my perspective.
Yeah, but you still find the words to do it. You can't just like drop it, right?
Yeah.
You have to kind of build a bridge. I think you're probably creative, more creative than you're giving yourself credit for.
I want to explore writing more, just because I love, when I do read, I don't read a lot of fiction, but when I do read fiction, it's from like Tia Williams, and she writes like romance novels, and I'm like, I could really like, I think I can do this. You're right. I'm going to give it a shot.
Yes.
And writing classes are so important. GrubStreet's another great writing organization. I was a teaching fellow last year and just had the opportunity to teach classes and also take writing classes. So I need to take writing classes because being in community is so important, because as artists, whether you're a visual artist, whether you are a literary artist, like we're always in silos. And it's really important, like you said, creating the festival to be in a space where you're able to just like get it out in the world and just hear people's perspective about your work is really important. So
yeah,
I think creating space for my balance in my own writing is like not trying to do multiple things at a time. So like right now, like I released this anthology in June, and like right now I'm only writing for myself. And I miss journalism, so I love like food and cooking, and my friends in the room who know me, like I have been saying, I'm going to pitch. I'm saying this is like broadcasting on YouTube, so I'm holding myself accountable on record that I definitely miss journalism. I want to get into food writing and telling the stories of the amazing people that I have the opportunity to meet when I'm out in the streets being greedy all the time.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you a slightly different question to do with writing and feeling the need to write and wanting to, pursue your dreams versus knowing that what you put out there is somehow also going to be read as something from a community and feeling a responsibility towards the community. So when I'm writing, I definitely have Black people in Germany in mind. And one of the things that was really important to me was that if I'm going to write a book, this book could, I mean, in German, of course, but this book could be read in schools, could be read in universities. So I'm not about to be putting people in that horrible situation that my children have often been, where they're in the classroom and then there's a story about racism and the N-word is written out and everyone reads out the word like it's, you know, standard vocabulary and such. So I have that kind of idea in mind about what am I doing, what responsibility do I have? But at the same time, I'm not trying to, it's not a consensus novel, right? It's not got any, it's got corners and sharp bits, and it's the balance of how I can stay true to my story, stay true to the characters who might not be necessarily politically correct or nice or good all the time, but not wanting to cause harm at the same time with my writing. And I would be really interested to hear about what your experience is with that.
Great anxiety, like, I mean, until the end to like the very last, the final phase when you send it to the publisher, I'm constantly like reading. I mean, there's language in this book where I'm like, should you have used that word? That may be offensive. So I am very sensitive to that. Yeah, I think revision helps that, but I feel like once your art is out in the world, there's literally nothing for you to do but just like take whatever feedback that your viewer or your reader gets from it. And like sometimes, again, you don't always do the right things, and I think you learn from it. You take accountability. So yeah, that's what I usually do.
Yeah, definitely being accountable is the word, isn't it? That you can get feedback and then you can... I find it fascinating how people respond to feedback. There's... I have to think about this one German author who... this is online. Anyway, there's this one German author. Some people might know about this incident where there was a prize given out recently, the German Book Prize. Do you remember this story? Look, the people are smiling. So there was this one German author who felt the prize was his. He felt he had it in the bag, right? And then a woman was announced, actually, and he got up and he shouted at everybody and left the room. I find that really familiar. So, yeah, and I'm thinking about, how people deal with feedback and what can you do when your writing isn't quite what the audience maybe makes of it. And I'm really aware of that when I write, I put it out there, and then the actual work, I think, happens between the pages of the book and the reader. And so I'm always fascinated to hear, actually, what people have made of what I've written. And I agree with you, the best thing that we can do then, if something didn't quite hit the mark, is to do better next time, apologize and grow from that. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember I had an author talk a few years ago, and it was with my first book of poetry. And I wrote about like my relationship with my mother. And I'm someone, if people know me, I'm not someone that like cusses all the time. This week I've been cussing a lot. But like someone in the audience was like, why do you use that language in your writing? Like, you know, and she was just really critical. It was like, you can express yourself without using such vulgar language. And I was just like, thank you. That's how I was feeling when I wrote that book in like 8 hours, and it is what it is. So I think that, you know, art is created to be critique. It's a release for us. And I think that people can they can do whatever they would like with their criticism. Because we're still going to create, right? So
we're still going to create. And yeah, this is a good question about how we can create now in this particular time where there are book bans, there are hotly contested issues. You alluded to genocide, ongoing tragedies around the world. And in Germany at the moment, actually just this week, a law has been passed. It's not a law, sorry. A resolution has been passed that says that public funding will be withheld from cultural workers if they are shown to be anti-Semitic. And it's almost like we're heading into a situation where you have to sign a piece of paper to declare yeah, your allegiance to anti-Semitism, and that you agree that the state of Israel has a right to exist, and these very, very clear things are being placed on the context, the cultural context, and it's even affecting, of course, Jewish writers living in Germany. And within that context, what can we do? So how can we still try to assert our freedom within that context is one question I have for myself and for you. But also, how could we still try to critique it, like not only protecting our own freedom, but look, this is fundamentally wrong. We need to have freedom of expression. We need to have freedom of art. I think it should stay within legal, there shouldn't be defamation or something like that. But yeah, it feels to me like, so some of the writers that I most admire when I was studying German, some of the writers I most admire. Hello. Yeah, that's possible. Yeah. Hello. It's working? Yeah. Some of the writers I most admired were those who were highly political and critical of the governments at the time that they were living in. And I'm actually very inspired by them. And now I find myself living in a time where I think, what would they have done? What would they have written? In fact, the place that I'm staying in Los Angeles is the former home of a writer called Leon Feuchtwanger, who was a German Jewish exiled writer. He was forced to flee from Germany during the Nazi times, and he wrote highly critically of these governments. And I find it kind of ironic to be living in this house where this guy who was stateless at the end of his life, who could never return to Germany, he couldn't really leave the United States because he didn't have a passport or citizenship. I'm living in his house, and how can I use that situation to critique or to comment on what's going on in Germany right now? And also, like, what I imagine is likely to be happening in the United States. Do I see that correctly? That I know if they're banning Toni Morrison, like...
Yeah, I think that we, as individual artists, like we have the right and the autonomy to decide if we're going to be that person to answer the call. There are particular conversations that I am going to only have with my village and my community, with amongst Black people, that I'm not going to be I'm not going to have it on a public forum or a space.
Okay.
And personally, I have been writing about Palestine and the genocide and how that is just, it's horrible. And I've been writing poetry about it, and that's how I'm showing up. I have another speaking engagement next week. Will I share that poem? I don't know. And it's not because I'm frightened, but I think that there's a time and a place to share particular works about particular issues. So I don't know, I'm gonna see how I'm feeling, but I am creating about things that, that may seem like radical views in this country. It doesn't mean that I'm not processing it, I don't see it, and I'm not, not sleeping at night and having terrible nightmares about genocide, because that's something that is really real. And even the violence that takes place in our, in our own country, thinking about in urban communities. So yeah, I think as artists, if that is your call to action and your call to share and be on a platform to, express truths about particular issues, then I say go for it.
Yeah. And it feels to me like it's important to weigh. I think it's a good idea what you've said about being very aware of which context you're presenting your work in, and just being aware of what the consequences could be of it. Yeah.
I think that there's a time and a place, and sometimes for some artists, like the time is right now when folks have a lot to say and need to get that off their chest, and I'm all for that. So, but also like as far as losing support for like culture and the arts, I think that's when community that we need to get together to support artists when we possibly will see funding being stripped, not as many artist residencies for artists or grants. That again, there is power in your dollar, that you are investing in investing in spaces that regardless of who is in government, that will still support our work and for other artists so that they're able to, because artists are so necessary to society, which is why I feel like the government invests in it, because we make the world beautiful, we make the world sound beautiful and look beautiful and taste so good and yummy. So we are necessary. Like our doctors and our teachers, artists are extremely necessary. So it's important for us as individuals, like you showing up tonight, you're supporting us, this institution, like, oh, actually people wanna hear two Black writers talk about all of the things. Your presence is just, I have so much gratitude for all of you for taking time out of your day just to be here, to let institutions like this know that people want to be in community. People really do believe in Black writers and artists. It's really significant, especially, I mean, always, art has always been truly like important to society. So
Definitely, definitely. How much time do we still have?
I think we ran, we look at us.
Yeah.
We are,
Then we can,
it's 5 o'clock. Look at us on time.
Yeah.
Does anyone have questions?
Lots of questions. How do we moderate this?
Hey, if you have a question, please
can you,
raise your hand. I will bring the microphone so it will be on our recording.
Hi, my name's Karina. I've heard you guys mention a lot about space, place, and migration. Can you talk about the ways that your concepts of home have changed in your writing over the years?
A great question.
Concepts of home. It's funny that question, the word home is very specific in German as well, or one of the translations is a word Heimat. And this word is has a very strong connotation that I didn't quite catch when I first moved to Germany. So people would ask me about, oh, where's your Heimat? And I'd be, oh, it's there, blah, blah, blah. And I was talking so positively about this word. And then this has changed because I'm now involved with movements and people who are critical, very, very critical of the word. Heimat is a concept that's been used by, right-wing, very conservative, right-wing extremists to talk about, who is we? And this concept of home and we is often very tightly focused on what is considered to be really German, which is people who are white, who've lived there for generations, and excludes then people who are, they use the term of migratory background, which is a term I really don't like. And so Heimat has a very specific connotation now that I hadn't, but normally I would have said home is something like a place which is more tightly bound with individuals than geography. And it's about who I'm in close contact with, and a warm feeling, blah, blah. But it's for me, not a physical place.
Home is definitely not a physical place for me. I had an interesting childhood. So what I've learned and what I'm discovering about the concept of home is it's not a physical place. Like home is within my body. So wherever I am home. And also home to me is a feeling. I have I went to Barbados, and I've gone there a few times because I always say my godfather's from there. I love him so much. But I feel so safe and warm, and literally and figuratively warm there. And I just feel so at peace and free. And that is the feelings that I look for when I think of what does home feel like for me. It's feeling easeful, it's feeling safe, and it's feeling free. So I can be anywhere on the earth, and as long as I can have those feelings, that is home. So like home is literally in my body. Our bodies are temples. I truly believe that. And yeah, home is just within. So it's not a physical place.
Mm-hmm.
So my question is for Sharon. When I saw you were coming, I had a question immediately I wanted to answer. I think in the last week, I have a bit more of a sense of which way you'll go. But speaking of Heimat, in your essay in Eure Heimat, you wrote about the conversation with your son and how he experienced racism differently than you did growing up. And so as I read that, my question was, how much was related to place, where you grew up, versus the time you grew up? And I think in the last week, I've become much more aware of the TikTok generation and that so much information is shared through channels which have no accountability whatsoever. And things such as books. Sometimes I feel like my generation will be the last one buying books. And so I wondered if you could talk a little bit about how the experience of racism has changed from your generation to your sons, and also to Nakia, if you have any sense from your parents' generation to yours, what has changed in the experience?
Or even the next generation. You work a lot with young people, young women, so I guess you could also speak about what they experience and if there was any difference to what you've experienced. I can begin, though.
Yeah.
Yeah. The essay that you referenced, I was specifically that it was this word Heimat that had gained a resurgence. There was a government department that was then named the Heimat Ministerium, and it was something, let's all be proud of Germany again, at a time when that was considered to be problematic for many people. Anyway, I won't go too far into that, but the book was a reaction to that development, and it was saying that for many people, this concept of home in Germany isn't safe. And one of the last sentences in the essay that I wrote is from my son, or the last sentence, and he says, "Home is a concept I've had to fight for. The fight is part of home. Me fighting to say I am German is part of my concept of being at home in Germany." And that was very fascinating to me. I was asked if I could write what it's like to be a Black mother raising children in Germany. And I decided I couldn't write that text without really having a conversation with my children about it. I felt like this had to be a double event, I would say. And so I asked my son if he would talk to me, and then I recorded our conversation. And basically what the essay is a kind of a transcription of the conversation we had with some comments from me. And what I talk about is the difference between when I was growing up, my parents both came from Ghana, so they'd grown up and lived in a society where I guess they'd had a vague concept of racism, but it was something that had not much to do with their day-to-day lived life, right? They lived in a place where everybody looked the same, they were all related, they all spoke the same language. They may all have had this weird dream about one day moving to England and becoming rich, I guess everybody, or to the United States. But they, for the most part, felt affirmed and reaffirmed in their day-to-day lived life. Yeah. Whereas when I was growing up, I had this experience of living in London, where at home I was in Ghana, right? I was eating Ghanaian food and I was living according to the Ghanaian law. My parents were really strict. Maybe we can have a conversation about parents another time. Yeah, my opinion didn't count at home, right? My parents were like, you do what you're told and you don't raise your eyebrows and nothing. And then I'd go to school where everyone's kind of hanging out and they can go out late at night and do what they like and they swear at their parents. And I'm like, what? And I just felt like it was a weird experience having these two completely different spheres that I had to somehow, when I'm at school, my opinion does count. And if I don't say it, then I lose grades, right? Whereas when I'm at home, be quiet. It was kind of an interesting experience of growing up. And what I experienced was in the UK that I would say I definitely experienced racism when I was growing up, but I wouldn't have been able to name it. I wouldn't have been able to point to what exactly it was. And I think it had a lot to do with how I was perceived. It had a lot to do with what was expected of me, what I could possibly hope to achieve. And those were things that were really not spoken out explicitly, but I could see who is the person who's reading the news, who's the person who's the politician, who's the person who's the bank manager, who are the teachers, mostly a sea of white people. So I grew up thinking, like, okay, there's something not quite right. There's something that can quite fit together, but it wasn't really explicit in my memory. Whereas when I went to Germany, one of my earliest experiences of going to Germany is like, yeah, you're a foreigner. And I'm like, yeah, I am. And he was like, okay, yes, we're all speaking the same language. Because I felt like in Germany, the racist experiences I was having were kind of more, I could put my finger on it and I could say, yeah, that's happening because they think this about me and they're even saying it. They're so kind as to actually verbalize what they think. So that was how living in Germany, with all the difficulties that I did experience, was somehow made more sense in my mind. It was less painful to live in Germany with German experience than it was in Britain with British racism. Then when my children are growing up, I remember thinking they're going to have it completely different. They're going to have it so good because I'm going to be such a good mum. I'm going to talk to them about everything, give them all the vocabulary in the books and the films. You know, we watch Malcolm X together at home and all this, right? So that they're going to be so clued up. And Tyrell, the person who I speak to in the essay, he really was very clued up, really clever guy. And he goes into school, he experiences something racist, and he's able to nail it down. He can explain it on a structural level. He's not upset. He's just like, no, you shouldn't say that or you shouldn't do that because this. And what I had underestimated was, I first of all didn't really understand that Tyrell could do something like that because I was like, no, you have the knowledge, but you don't say it. You don't invite people to give you backlash, right? But I'd underestimated that Tyrell kind of thought, oh, if I just explain it to people, I'm talking like a 6-year-old boy, you know, if I just explain it to my teacher, they'll go, oh, I see. And then it'll be all fine and it won't happen again. What he'd underestimated and what I'd underestimated is this white tears thing. And so when he had this racist incident that I describe in the book, and then all hell broke loose, we were both like really shocked because we didn't have, you know, he was really shocked, like it didn't pan out. He thought, okay, I thought it was a lack of information, but it's something else. And then he describes his learning experience of how, racism for many white people is something that is just simply not allowed to exist. We cannot have that. So if you tell somebody that something's racist, then they'll find a million reasons to explain it away, but it can't be racism. And he had to grow up with that. He had to find a strategy to deal with that I didn't. I didn't grow up negotiating racism that way. I just kind of ducked out and went somewhere else. Whereas Tyrell says, no, I'm going to keep fighting. And his strategy then became to take a deep breath and then explain it. He just, throughout school, he was furious. But at a certain point, he decided that he didn't want to carry that anger anymore. And he has become very good at just kind of taking a deep breath and saying, look, that wasn't okay because X, Y, Z. Yeah. Does that answer your question? Yeah.
I'll say something about racism that I think that people don't understand. Like, it is not what we watch on television or what we read in Uncle Tom's Cabin or To Kill a Mockingbird. The most damaging part, I'd rather know how you feel about my people, like what we consider, you know, what folks experience maybe like in the South, like spewing hatred and derogatory, like, I'd rather that, so I know where you stand. Because the harmful part of race, and that is hurtful too, and that is not okay. I don't advise anyone to do that because, you know, yeah, but the most harmful part of racism is it's a seeping and oozing, it's like a cancer. And, you know, you don't know that it exists until you like actually go and get tested, and it just grows and it grows and you don't know that it exists, and it could literally kill you. And it can be embedded in institutions, which it is a part of a lot of our institutions, not only in this country, but internationally, and also in our thoughts, and we don't realize it, which is why we need to constantly check ourselves when we're in, not even only in positions of power, but like when you are engaging with someone who's different than yourself, how are you treating them? We saw that with this election, like, because there will be a woman president one day. They didn't cut it at the root. They just, you know, just cut the stem a bit, because we're not going to stop. We're going to continue to fight, and to continue to be great. But I think that, yeah, racism is just, it prevents people from, it's harmful. It prevents people from getting ahead. And it's just, yeah, it's an oozing cancer that is just terrible. And I'll just leave it there, but it's not what we think it is. It's not using derogatory terms and that. It's our behavior. It's in our policies. It's in our, you know, legislation. That is a huge part of racism and extremely harmful, that hinders individuals from progressing or, you know, getting what individuals who think that they are superior over. I can speak for myself as a Black woman over a Black woman, like.
And cultivating home, making space for that, and making space for it as an author, as a public figure who kind of, you know, does the brave thing. You put your work out there, you invite that criticism. And so the kind of, you know, the other end of the insidious quiet racism is now all of a sudden when you're out there, you become a lightning rod for the much more blatant racism. So I'm reflecting on my own work as a university professor, where even just my presence in the room sometimes, while it can be very affirming for a lot of students, it is in direct conflict with the way that many students see the world, and they take that out. So how do you kind of protect yourselves in those moments when you are genuinely trying to take feedback, take criticism, kind of integrate that, but still guarding your own safety and guarding your own health when some of that criticism is simply not useful in any way? And how do you think of that also when you're considering, you know, bringing the tender, the sensitive parts of your own experience, the private aspects of your life into this work, because that's incredibly important. Those specifics are so important for understanding, but it's also, you know, you're kind of walking this tightrope between keeping your life safe and, you know, the inside thoughts, I like to joke, the conversations that we only have amongst ourselves, you know, putting that out there.
That's such a nice question. Shall I begin?
Yes.
Yeah.
I like when you start.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, good. But you can always jump in. That's fine. I really like that question. because it kind of makes very transparent a huge part of my work, which is negotiating things like that, both in the writing and then in spaces like this when I then talk about it. Part of my answer is, at a certain point in time, I think when somebody is criticizing, for example, criticizing my writing, it's really revealing a lot about them and doesn't say that much about me. And that's often the case also with racism, like it's telling you a lot about the person who's expressing it and not so much about the person who's receiving it. So that helps when I can distance myself and say, okay, that's interesting that you think that. I think I've made a decision to stay vulnerable. I think that's the only thing I have that they can't take away, right? It's so important because I think to be emotionally distant and to say this isn't, I'm not going to engage. I feel like that's the beginning of the end. I see you nodding. I'd like to talk to you about that. I'm just thinking as I'm speaking, but I think the vulnerability has to stay. And I'm speaking from a very specific experience I recently had where almost this time last year, I was in Australia, also in the Goethe-Institut. Shout out to the Goethe-Institut, by the way, who's also, am I allowed to say that the Goethe-Institut struggles because cultural funding is a big problem. It's really under attack. Anyway, I was in Australia and I found out I was about to be awarded a prize. Oh, and that's not true. I knew before, and it was about to become public that I was going to be awarded this prize. And I remember waiting to see that it come online so that I could share it everyone because I'd had to keep it quiet. A prize in Germany. But before I found out, or before it became public knowledge that I had won this prize, a blog post appeared, which was a hit job, a defamation article on me. So they had gotten the information very fast. I think within the jury, somebody had leaked the information. And what had happened was some time ago, I'm going to say 2015, sometime way before I was a public figure, I had signed a petition from UK for Palestine, Artists for Palestine UK. I'd signed that petition, and the statement was something like, I will not participate, if I'm invited by an Israeli cultural organization, I as a writer won't read there. It was something until they uphold human rights. That was the statement. I'd written that at a time when I could have known, I think I didn't know, but I could have known that that was controversial in the German context because there's a specific responsibility on people in Germany to engage with the memory of the Holocaust, the Shoah. And one of the things that it was very present during, like 1938, today, 1938 is... do you say anniversary? The day anniversary of the Reichspogromnacht, which is sometimes called Kristallnacht or Crystal Night of Breaking Glass, where Nazis just went around breaking up synagogues, burning Jewish shops, and so on. So and that was a time when people were like, don't buy from Jewish business people. So that's the reason why the concept of boycotting anything Jewish is so difficult within that context. So when I signed the petition, that wasn't really at the forefront. Like I said, it's a UK petition. It wasn't a thing that was really on my forefront of my mind. And I was a nobody. I was like writing tear-stained love songs in my diary. Who was I? I won't go to Israel. No one was going to invite me in the first place, right? But then I'm about to win a prize, and somebody has dug out this signature and said that because I signed that petition, that means I may be a supporter of BDS, which I hadn't really done any research. I didn't really know what they were accusing me of. And BDS by then, I think it was in the 20s that the BDS became frowned upon in Germany, and it was another one of these things. If you support BDS, then you can't get public funding. And because I maybe support BDS, I shouldn't get this prize. And then all of a sudden, that was all over the press. And because I was so far away, everything was happening a day later for me, right? I was reading the stuff that they were writing in their morning, and it was the middle of my night, and also it was highly stressful. But to answer your question, what happened there was I was under attack, and it was clear that I had to find a good defense. The chances that I would have been completely, like, no one would work with me ever again, I'll lose my book contracts. They had threatened to cancel the festival. The festival was supposed to not happen. There's a play on about my book. They said, take the play down. Like, all these things were about to disappear. I had to find a response. I did find a response. And part of the response was that I said, I don't want the prize anymore. Like, I'm very sorry, the prize money should be donated to an initiative that does work on encouraging communication between Israeli German people and Palestinian German people in schools, this kind of thing. So I stand by my response, but there wasn't really a lot of room. I wouldn't really have had many other options, to be honest. And I think about that a lot because one of the questions that we thought we might discuss is why I'd written on my website that I'm not on social media at the moment. That was the reason. I'd gone off social media then because I was so horrified. Like, I was supposed to be receiving a prize for things I had done, you know. I do a lot of work, and I'm very proud of the work I did. And you're going to strip my prize and my livelihood because I signed a petition when, you know, so, and it wasn't even that I'd had the opportunity to respond before this shitstorm happened. If I'd said something wrong in response to the accusation, we can talk. So I was so disappointed, also in the German media, not so much the people who wrote the blog post, because they do that. They did the same with Achille Mbembe, they do that. But I thought the media have a much greater responsibility to try and protect the interests of, like, they should call into they should hold the powerful to account. And I don't think the media are doing that. And in the way I observe it in the States is also not doing such a hot job. So I was so disappointed in that I just kind of withdrew for a while and thought about, what can I do? What are my options now? And I felt like I couldn't write in German anymore. That was a thing that happened. And then I came back to this feeling of, no, I'm not going to go hard. I'm going to stay soft. I'm going to stay vulnerable and sensitive. And so I've just recently started on Instagram again. Just
really? Okay.
Dip my big toe back into the waters. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry that happened to you. That's terrible.
Yeah.
And I appreciate you. And again, back to all the things, my response to the election in this week, yes, I allowed myself to be angry and exhausted, and I wrote some unfinished pieces, like an essay that I'm working on and a poem, and I'm still just trying to find all of the words, which I don't think I'll ever find, to describe how I am feeling. But also, once I just came up for air, I'm like, the work, you know, I'm still going to show up as myself because it is work to be a Black woman. I can only speak from my perspective and who I will live and die to be. But breathing has really been helping me, challenging myself to pick up the phone when I didn't want to talk, and tell people how much they love me and support me, that are here for me, and that, you know, being in conversation, being in community, asking for help has helped, taking a step back. And what I plan to do is continue to speak truth to power, period. So.